There is a moment, quiet and unannounced, when a person catches their reflection in a window they weren't trying to look into, and for half a second they see themselves the way a stranger might. Not the way they've trained themselves to see their own face after years of picking it apart in mirrors under bad lighting. Not the way they've been taught to measure themselves against filtered photographs and curated lives. Just themselves, and in that half second, something strange happens. They almost don't recognize the person looking back. Because the person looking back seems, somehow, more than they believe themselves to be. That moment passes quickly, because we are trained to dismiss it. We are trained to return immediately to the inner critic, the internal editor who has been running commentary since childhood, cataloguing flaws, comparing, measuring, finding lack. We live most of our lives with this critic as our roommate, and after enough years we stop noticing its voice as separate from our own. We think its opinion is simply the truth. We think when it says, "You are not attractive enough, not confident enough, not enough," that this is fact rather than habit. But here is something worth sitting with tonight. Attractiveness, the real kind, the kind that makes people remember you long after you've left a room, the kind that draws others toward you without a single word of effort, was never primarily about the architecture of a face or the symmetry of features or the number on a scale. It was never really about the things the mirror obsesses over. It has always been about something deeper, something more elusive, something that most people carry without ever knowing they carry it. And tonight, we are going to walk through that truth together. We are going to look at 8 signs that you are already more attractive than you believe yourself to be. Not to inflate your ego, not to hand you empty flattery, but because recognizing these signs in yourself is part of a larger awakening. It is part of remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Let's begin with presence, because presence is the foundation everything else stands on. Have you ever met someone who wasn't conventionally striking, who wasn't dressed expensively, who wasn't performing charisma, and yet the moment they walked into a room, something shifted, conversations softened, attention gathered toward them, not because they demanded it, but because they simply occupied their own space fully? That is presence. And if people have ever told you that being around you feels calming, that talking to you feels different than talking to most people, that you have a way of making a room feel less tense the moment you enter it, then you already carry this. May have dismissed it as nothing, some small compliment tossed your way in passing, but it is not nothing. Presence is one of the rarest qualities a human being can hold, because it requires you to be inhabiting your own body and your own moment, instead of living 3 steps ahead in anxious anticipation or 3 steps behind in regret. Most people are not present. Most people are haunted by yesterday or worried about tomorrow, and so their energy is scattered, thin, hard to feel. But when you have moments of genuine presence, when you are simply here, fully here, people feel it even if they cannot name it. They feel gravity around you. They feel safety around you. This is not something you can fake with practiced eye contact or rehearsed body language. It comes from a place of internal settledness, and if you have ever been told that being near you feels good, that is your first sign. You carry more gravity than you know. The second sign is something almost nobody talks about, and it is this. You listen more than you speak, and you listen with your whole self, rather than waiting for your turn. In a world addicted to being heard, addicted to performing opinions, addicted to interrupting because everyone is desperate to prove they matter, a person who can sit quietly and actually receive another human being's words is doing something almost radical. If you find that people open up to you easily, that strangers tell you things they don't tell their closest friends, that people leave conversations with you feeling lighter than when they arrived, this is not a small thing. This is one of the most magnetic qualities a person can possess, because what people are truly starving for is not admiration. It is not attention. It is to be witnessed, to be truly seen and heard without judgment, without an agenda, without someone waiting to talk about themselves. If you have this gift, even if you've never called it a gift, even if you thought it was just something you did without thinking, understand that this quality alone has made people fall in love with others throughout the whole of human history. Being truly listened to is one of the most intimate experiences a person can have, and if you offer that to people, you are offering something more valuable than any physical feature could ever be. The third sign lives in your flaws. strangely enough, and in your willingness to acknowledge them. There is a particular kind of confidence that doesn't come from believing you are perfect. It comes from being at peace with the fact that you are not, and choosing to stand in your own skin anyway. If you can laugh at your own mistakes without collapsing into shame. If you can admit when you were wrong without spiraling into self-punishment. If you can say, "I don't know," without feeling diminished by the admission, you are demonstrating something that draws people in more than false perfection ever could. Because perfection, or the performance of it, creates distance. It makes people feel small in comparison, and it makes people afraid to be imperfect around you. But someone who owns their humanity, who is comfortable enough with themselves to reveal the cracks, gives everyone around them silent permission to do the same. That permission is intoxicating. People don't fall for the mask. They fall for the moment the mask slips and something real is underneath. If you have ever been complimented for being so real or so down to earth, that compliment was not small talk. That was someone recognizing your willingness to be human in a world that constantly asks people to be curated, edited, and filtered. The fourth sign is the way you make others feel about themselves when they are around you. This might be the single most underestimated form of attraction that exists, because we have been taught to think attraction is about how someone makes us feel about them, when in truth, the deepest and most lasting form of attraction is about how someone makes us feel about ourselves. If people leave your presence feeling more capable, more interesting, more worthy than they did before they spoke to you, you possess something extraordinarily rare. Some people have a talent for shrinking others, whether through comparison, competition, or careless cruelty. And then there are people who have the opposite gift. They ask questions that make you feel like your answer matters. They remember small details about your life that you mentioned once in passing. They celebrate you without a trace of envy. If this describes you, even a little, know that this quality creates a kind of loyalty and longing in others that no physical trait could replicate. People will forget what you looked like on any given day. They will never forget how being around you made them feel about their own worth. The fifth sign is your relationship with your own strangeness. The parts of you that don't quite fit the mold, the interests, obsessions, quirks, and perspectives that you have, at some point in your life, learned to hide because they made you feel too different. Here is something worth hearing clearly. The very things you were taught to be embarrassed about are very often the things that make you unforgettable. Uniqueness is not a flaw to be corrected. It is the fingerprint of your particular soul moving through this particular life, and it cannot be replicated by anyone else who has ever lived or will ever live. When you allow your specific weirdness to exist without apology, whether it's the way your mind connects unrelated ideas, or your strange sense of humor, or the obscure things you love that most people don't understand, you stop blending into the background noise of sameness that surrounds most of us. People are drawn to distinctiveness, the way eyes are drawn to the one object in a room that doesn't match everything else. If you have ever been told you're different, in a tone that felt like it was meant as a compliment, even if it was delivered clumsily, understand that difference. When owned rather than hidden, becomes magnetism. The sixth sign is carried in your resilience, in the quiet strength that lives in you because of what you have already survived. Every hardship you have moved through, every heartbreak, every failure, every version of yourself you had to rebuild from nothing, has left something behind in you that cannot be manufactured or faked. It is depth. It is a kind of grounded wisdom that only comes from having been broken and having chosen, again and again, to keep going anyway. People can sense this in others, even when it isn't spoken aloud. There is a stillness in someone who has survived real difficulty, a steadiness that people who have never been tested simply do not have. If you carry scars, visible or invisible, and you have kept moving forward despite them, you are not damaged goods, no matter what any harsh inner voice may have told you on your hardest nights. You are proof that a human being can be shattered and still choose to rebuild themselves with intention. That is not a weakness that needs to be hidden from the world. That is one of the most quietly compelling qualities a person can hold. Because everyone, whether they admit it or not, is looking for evidence that survival is possible. When they meet someone who embodies that evidence, they are drawn toward them the way a person lost in the cold is drawn toward warmth. The seventh sign is your capacity for genuine curiosity about the people and the world around you. Self-obsession, even when it's dressed up as confidence, repels people over time, because at its core it communicates that nothing outside the self is particularly interesting or worthy of attention. But curiosity, real curiosity, the kind that leans in and asks, "Tell me more about that," and actually means it, is one of the most attractive traits a human being can develop. If you find yourself endlessly interested in why people think the way they think, what shaped them, what they dream about, what scares them, what lights them up, you are practicing a form of love that most people are too self-focused to offer. Curiosity says, without needing to say it directly, you are worth understanding, and to be found worth understanding is one of the deepest human cravings there is. If you have this quality, even quietly, even if you've never thought of it as anything special, know that it has likely made people feel more alive simply by being in conversation with you. The eighth and final sign is perhaps the quietest of all, and it is this: you are still here, still trying, still reaching toward growth even on the days when it would be easier to give up on yourself entirely. The fact that you are absorbing these words right now, turning them over, wondering if any of this applies to you, is itself evidence of something important. It means the part of you that wants to grow, that wants to understand yourself more clearly, that wants to become someone you're proud of, is still very much alive. That part of you has not been extinguished by whatever comparisons, disappointments, or unkind voices have tried to convince you otherwise. People who are actively engaged in their own becoming, who are willing to look honestly at themselves and keep choosing growth over stagnation, carry an unmistakable energy. It is the energy of motion, of aliveness, of someone who refuses to be finished. And that energy, more than any physical feature ever could, is what people find themselves inexplicably drawn to, even when they cannot articulate why. Now, having walked through these 8 signs together, I want to invite you into something deeper, because recognizing these qualities in yourself is only the beginning. The real work, the real awakening, happens when you stop outsourcing your sense of worth to mirrors, to numbers, to the opinions of strangers on a screen, to the standards built by industries that profit from your insecurity. For most of your life, you may have been looking outward for permission to feel worthy, waiting for someone else to confirm what you suspected but never quite believed, that you were enough exactly as you are. But permission granted from the outside is fragile. It can be taken away as easily as it was given. The moment someone stops complimenting you, the moment a relationship ends, the moment you compare yourself to someone new and feel yourself shrink, that borrowed sense of worth collapses, because it was never truly yours. It was rented, not owned. What you are being invited toward now is something sturdier. It is the slow, deliberate process of turning inward and meeting the parts of yourself that you have spent years avoiding, judging, or hiding from view. This is not comfortable work. It rarely is. Growth of this kind asks you to sit with the parts of your story you'd rather skip past, the moments you were rejected, the moments you failed, the moments you weren't chosen, and to look at them not with shame, but with compassion. Because those moments did not happen to make you smaller. They happened, and you survived them. And in surviving them, you gathered depth that a person who has never suffered will simply never have access to. There is no shortcut around this process. There is no filter, no amount of external validation, no relationship, no achievement that can substitute for the quiet internal work of coming home to yourself. And this is where the real transformation begins, because once you stop needing the world to constantly confirm your worth, you become someone the world cannot help but notice. This sounds paradoxical, but it is one of the truest patterns in human experience. Desperation repels. Neediness repels. Not because needing things makes you unworthy, but because desperate energy signals to others that you are searching outside yourself for something you have not yet found within. But someone who has done the work, who has sat with their own darkness and their own light and made peace with both, radiates a kind of calm that cannot be imitated. That calm becomes its own gravitational field. People are pulled toward it the way they are pulled toward anyone who seems to have found something they are still searching for. Understand this clearly. You were not born believing you were unattractive, unworthy, or not enough. That belief was constructed, brick by brick, out of comparisons you didn't choose to make, criticisms you internalized before you had the tools to question them, and cultural messaging designed specifically to keep you feeling like you are perpetually falling short of some invented ideal. You absorb these messages the way a child absorbs a language, without consent, without the ability to filter what was true from what was simply repeated often enough to feel true. But a belief that was built can also be dismantled, slowly, imperfectly, with setbacks along the way, but it can be dismantled. And every time you catch yourself in the old pattern of self-criticism and choose, instead, to speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you love, you are laying a new brick in a different structure. You are building a version of yourself that is not dependent on anyone else's approval to feel whole. There is an old, quiet truth that shows up across nearly every culture and every era of human history, in different language and different form, and it is simply this. What you seek outside yourself, you already carry within. The connection you long for, the admiration you crave, the sense of being truly seen that you've spent years chasing through relationships and achievements and attempts at self-improvement, none of it was ever missing from you. It was buried under layers of doubt, under years of measuring yourself against impossible standards, under the exhausting performance of trying to be acceptable to people who were never going to be satisfied no matter what you did. The work now is not to become someone new. The work is to remove what was never truly yours to begin with, the borrowed shame, the inherited insecurities, the standards that were designed by people who profit from your dissatisfaction, and to rediscover what was underneath the entire time. This is the deeper meaning behind everything we've discussed tonight. The 8 signs are not a checklist meant to prove your worth to anyone else. They are mirrors, each one reflecting back a piece of yourself you may have overlooked, dismissed, or been too afraid to fully claim. Your presence, your ability to listen, your comfort with your own imperfection, your generosity toward others' sense of self, your uniqueness, your resilience, your curiosity, your ongoing commitment to growth. These are not small things. These are the very things that make a human being unforgettable, and you have likely been carrying several of them, maybe all of them, without ever once stopping to recognize their weight. So here is an invitation, not a demand, not another standard to strain toward, but a gentle invitation. The next time you catch your reflection in a window you weren't expecting, in a mirror under harsh lighting, in a photo you didn't approve of before it was taken, try something different. Instead of immediately reaching for the critic's voice, the one that has been running commentary for years, pause. Just for a moment, look at yourself the way someone who deeply respects you would look at you. Look for the presence you carry into rooms. Look for the way your face changes when you're truly listening to someone. Look for the evidence, written into the lines of your own life, of everything you have survived, and everything you have become despite it. You are not required to feel instantly transformed by this practice. Growth rarely happens in dramatic, cinematic moments. It happens in small, repeated choices, in the quiet decision, made over and over, to treat yourself with the same patience and respect you would offer to someone you love. You were never as far from being enough as your inner critic convinced you that you were. The signs were always there, quietly present in the way people feel calmer around you, in the way strangers open up to you, in the way you've kept moving forward, even through the hardest seasons of your life. You didn't need to become someone else to be worthy of belonging, of connection, of love, of being truly seen. You needed only to stop believing the story that told you otherwise. And now, having walked through this together, having named these truths out loud rather than letting them remain buried, you carry the beginning of something different. Not arrogance, not an inflated sense of self that needs constant defending. Something quieter and far more durable, a settled knowing that you were, and are, and will continue to be, more than enough exactly as you are, becoming more fully yourself with every honest step you take. Carry that with you tonight, not as a fact you need to prove to anyone else, but as a truth you are finally allowed to believe about yourself.